John Kerry served as President Obama's Secretary of State in his second administration, and the two men didn't always agree on foreign policy, especially when it came to Syria. I want to ask you about another key relationship, Barack Obama. Specifically, you said, "I never succeeded in persuading him to give me the tool I wanted most, greater
Correct.
leverage."
Correct.
What do you mean?
Well, from the moment I was nominated and asked, what about Syria, I said, we have to change Assad's calculation. And throughout the 4 years I was Secretary of State, and privileged to be so, I always raised the issue in the meetings we had about how we needed to change that calculation. I particularly believed that after Assad had been violating ceasefires, it was clear he needed to be taught a lesson. He needed to know that we were going to hold him accountable, and I raised that directly with the Russians, and I put several ideas on the table. The president was not persuaded by my argument. I believed that we had several options we could have done at very low risk to be able to make it clear to Assad that when we had a ceasefire and when he said he was going to live by it, he had to live by it. And I thought we should have done that.
Was he too risk-averse?
As I say in the book, my job and the job of anybody in a cabinet is to put an idea in front of the president, to argue the idea. The president is the decider. And there is no clarity by which I can say to you, I was 100% right, or the president was 100% wrong, or vice versa. Those are the judgments that are made by a president.
But do you think he was too risk-averse?
No, I think he had an attitude about Syria and a judgment about Syria. And he had a feeling about where that might take him if he made some of the decisions that I and others proffered.
Well, you write about this in detail. It's an entire chapter in the book. Because you, to be very frank, were hung out to dry here because you went on television.
I don't write that. I don't say I was hung out to dry.
No, that's my characterization.
You know that. You're characterizing
I know that. I'm characterizing your retelling, though, where you went out and you made this prosecutorial, very careful argument about the chemical weapons attacks.
And what I write about is we paid a price for the way it played out without the red line being enforced by the bombing. But we got the chemical weapons out, which was the objective.
Even though there have been chemical weapons attacks since then.
We knew there were precursor chemicals, and we knew that there was chlorine, which when mixed, they still had ability. Those aren't declared. That's just the vagary of the system by which they measure.
But there have been sarin gas attacks since then, so
yes, that is
under
correct.
the Trump administration.
It's absolutely correct. And I supported President Trump's response to those partially. I supported the use of force, but I don't support just a one-off where you drop a few bombs and there's no follow-up diplomacy and no additional effort to try to use the leverage you get out of doing that. I thought that the president should have done that. President Trump should have done that. And
you thought President Obama should have done that,
yes,
too.
Yes, that's correct.
You were sent around the world to rally support for other countries to stand with the United States to say that this red line on use of chemical weapons needed to be enforced. How difficult was that for you, given that the president blinked? He decided not to go through with those military strikes.
Congress was clearly not going to give him the authority that he wanted.
But you thought that the president could have gone ahead with those strikes. You were in the book, you write about being surprised when he called you and said, I'm going to go to Congress.
I was surprised. I thought we were going to go forward. I thought that weekend was the weekend. I expected the phone call to be telling me that he decided we were striking that night or whatever was going to happen. And it wasn't. My job was to then affect the president's policy, and I did the best I could in going to Congress and arguing the case. But I do write that we paid a price for that. There's no question about that. We paid a price. And all the explanations and everything else doesn't change the perception. And perceptions sometimes are very telling in diplomacy and politics. You
paid a price. You mean the red line moment has come to, for many critics of President Obama, define his foreign policy and define it as weak, as not backing up a threat.
For many people, that's exactly what I ran into. And I ran into that in the Middle East. It was something that I had to push back against for a long period of time. And that's why I say perceptions. But perceptions matter, obviously, in everything. But I don't think it's fair in terms of the president, quote, being weak, because the president took a lot of very tough positions and did a lot of things that evidenced strength and that showed a president who had a very clear moral compass as well as a very clear set of values and principles by which he knew he could protect our country.
I'm pressing you on this because you write in the book about thinking even now about what you call the open wounds in Syria, that you think almost every day.
Well, the open wound of Syria is that maybe 500,000 people have now died. It was about 100,000 back in 2013 when the chemical weapons attack took place. It has been an ongoing atrocity, a violation of every sense of propriety, of human rights, of diplomatic rectitude. I mean, you run the list of things that are at stake in Syria. It is a sad history for the international community, not just for the United States. It is the failure of the global community to hold a tyrant, a war criminal, accountable for his behavior, and to have come together and tried to end a war. What I'm proud of is what I'm proud of is that we continually tried. We never stopped trying, even when it was tough, even when it looked bleak.
And you took some heat for not stopping.
Well, yeah, we took heat right up into the end, but that's okay by me. Assad is in the driver's seat today because of what Russia and Iran, Hezbollah have done. So we have an open wound. Yes, a global, an international community-owned open wound.
In those days, those very intense days when you were working diplomatically to try to build support to stand with the U.S. if they were to go through with a strike, we were at that press conference in London.
You asked the magic question. Is there anything that Assad could do? Was your question.
Is there anything at this point that his government could do or offer that would stop an attack?
Sure, he could turn over every single bit of his chemical weapons to the international community in the next week. Turn it over, all of it. It turned out to be the way we solved a critical problem. It was done purposefully in order to put out there a notion without a formal proposal, just as an answer to your question, which came at the right moment. And within an hour, I had a call from Sergei Lavrov, who said, let's follow up on that. We're interested in seeing if we can make that happen. There'd been a dance going back and forth, and I write about that as to whether or not they could or couldn't do it, were interested in it or weren't interested in it. But after I said it publicly like that, they took that as the possible off-ramp. And it turned out to be the way to get it done.
Do you regret that this is the diplomatic off-ramp that you ended up with, that ultimately what you strongly believe should have happened didn't?
No, what I regret is that there is that's such a incredibly powerful perception gained a foothold the way it did that had an impact on people's judgment about what the president was willing to do or not do.
Not enforcing the red line.
Correct. That's regrettable. It's regrettable for everybody. But I don't regret putting, the idea on the table. And I think it was a terrific outcome in the sense that we got all the declared weapons out of there.
Well, because there have been at least 2 large-scale chemical attacks.
Correct.
In the past few years.
Well, and during which time he's had an opportunity to reconstitute and gain a foothold, and there's been no further inspection and nothing else going on.